Hello and welcome back to math class. You can see we're going to jump today to lesson 24. I'm ready to get through this blue math book and get into our yellow one, but I just kind of want to do a little preview here. We're going to talk about fractions and percents, but we're still going to it's still all about ratios, and we know that ratios are two numbers, right? Two numbers. Well, today we're going to talk about some percents. For example, here's a percent. 70%. Well, 70% is still actually considered a ratio. 70% is actually two numbers. It's actually 70 over 100, because 100% is obviously always what students want to get. That's the percent we're reaching for. So when I have 70%, it's actually a ratio. Well, most of us know that we can actually write the ratio even like this. 70 to 100. Okay, that's the same as this, which is the same as this. Okay, so we're still looking at ratios, but today we're going to add percents to it. We're going to add percents. So we're going to go ahead and open up our math books to lesson 24. So if you guys can go ahead and find lesson 24, it looks like this. We're going to jump all the way to lesson 24 and get this blue math book completed. All right, so for this problem we're going to look at, you notice we're going to have a color key. So if you want to go get three different colors, any three colors you want, I'm going to use some colored pencils. You can use markers, crayons, whatever you need. But go ahead and pause your video and go get three different colors for exercise 1. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and read the problem. It says, Rob's fruit farm consists of 100 acres on which 3 different types of apples grow. On 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. All right, I'm going to use my color here to underline that one. On 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. All right, Macintosh apples grow on 30%. All right, here's my next one. Macintosh apples grow on 30%. The remainder of the farm grows Fuji apples. All right, so we just know that that's the remainder. Shade in the grid below to represent the portion of the farm each type of apple occupies. Use a different color for each type of apple. Create a key. Okay. To identify which color represents each type of apple. Well, they already have the 100 grids drawn for us, which is great. Let's look at our Empire apples. I'm going to use red. It says 25 acres. So 25 out of the 100. So we're going to go ahead and pause your video, and I want you to color 25, which my color is going to be red for my Empire. All right, so I have colored here 25 for the Empire. Let's see, that's part, so with the whole box here is 100. The whole box is 100. I've colored 25, so I'm going to write a ratio. Part would be, I colored part of them were 25, and our whole would be out of 100. Great. All right, let's move on to Macintosh. Macintosh says, Macintosh, 30%. Well, if you were paying attention to my video, my Macintosh is going to be blue. I don't know what color yours is. If you're paying attention to my video earlier, remember 30% is considered a ratio. It's two numbers because 30% goes over 100. So it's going to be 30% goes over 100. So go ahead and pause your video and color in 30 for me, please. All right, so let's see. I did 10, 20, 25, 30. All right, so I have my thing. All right, well, this is pretty easy so far. Let's see what's next. Now, it says here the remainder of the farm grows Fuji apples. All right, well, my Fuji apples are going to be green, and the remainder means we're going to color in all the rest. So pause your video and color all the rest. All right, so now we have to see. So let's see. The blue was 30 out of 100. My Empire was 25 out of 100. So green is all the rest. Well, let's see. I have 10, 20, 30, 40. It looks like 45. So my part of my green was 45. The whole would be out of 100. All right, so percents still have something to do with our ratios we've been talking about. All right, let's move down to exercise 2. The shaded portion of the grid below represents the portion of a granola bar remaining. So we have 3 questions. Here's our granola bar. It's 100 boxes. The shaded portion represents, it says here, the portion of the granola bar remaining. Sounds like to me somebody ate part of the granola bar. So let's look. It says here, what percent does each block of granola bar represent? Well, first of all, I want us to look at our grid here. They kind of have put decimals in here. And if you notice, this decimal is, we read it 1/100th. Well, okay, there's 100 boxes. Let's just look to see what happens. If I take here, let's see, we're going to type in, this is 100th. Let's go ahead and just put this in here and see what happens. Each box is 100. There's 100 of them. So if I take this times 100, what am I going to get? I've got one whole. So we have one whole box. Okay, so we have 100th. 100 times gives me one whole box. So we're going to kind of compare some decimals here with our front. But the question here says, what percent does each block of granola bar represent? So we're looking at just this block. Well, how many blocks is that? Well, that's one. That's one box out of how many boxes? Out of 100. All right, so we have 1 out of 100. But my question says percent. So we're going, 1 is over 100, so that would be my percent. So we're going to say that this block right there only represents 1%. Well, then if each block represents 1%, what percent of the granola bar remains? Now let's look. The shaded portion is the portion that remains. So all of this is what remains. How many boxes do we have shaded in? Well, let's count by tens. We have a row of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 boxes. That would be 80 boxes out of 100. Whole percent is always over 100, so that actually equals 80% of the granola bar remains. All right, well, what other ways can we represent this percent? Well, here's our percent, 80%. Well, we know that 80% is the same as 80 over 100. Okay, that's one way. Ooh, we could actually reduce this by canceling out our zeros and saying it could be 8 over 10 is the same. Ooh, and some of you are noticing we could actually reduce that again, cut it in half again, and that would be 4 out of 5. Some of you are actually noticing, what's this number right here? This is 8/10. We could even write it as a decimal, like this. 8/10. So lots of different ways to write 80%, which actually, remember, we started off as a ratio, two numbers. All right, go ahead and turn over to the next page, please. All right, so we're going to look at some 100 grids here, some shaded areas. It's kind of hard. I know some of them are darker and some are light, so let's go ahead and just work together on this. It says, for each figure shown, represent the gray shaded portion as a percent of the whole figure. Write your answer as a decimal. Oh boy, here we go. A decimal, a fraction, and a percent. So let's look at picture A here. Let's see how much of this is shaded darker. To me, it's these first two rows of 10, which would be 20 boxes, right? So we know that that is 20 out of 100 boxes. So let's go ahead and write it as a fraction first. So that's 20 out of 100 boxes are shaded. Okay, so we did here the fraction. Some of you know, oh, we can actually reduce that, Mrs. Hauk. We can reduce that to 2 over 10, which actually reduces to 1/5. Very good. All right, percent's easy. Well, let me move this up here. Percent always goes over 100. There's our 100. So our percent's going to be 20%. So we have our percent done. Our decimal. Some of you know how to change them to decimal. This is 20 hundredths, right? So we could actually say 0 and 20 hundredths, which also is the same as 0 and 2/10. We could cross this 0 off. These two are actually equal. You notice our 2/10 right here. All right, let's try this next picture. Okay, here's our picture. Look carefully at our picture. So I know that this is darker than this, but let's just go ahead and count all of this that's shaded. Let's count all of that. All right, so first thing we're going to do is let's do our fraction. How many boxes are shaded out of all of it? Well, we could count the rows. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 50 out of 100 boxes. Okay, well, if we cancel out those zeros, that's going to be 5 out of 10 reduced. Oh, some of you know that that reduces again to 1/2. All right, our percent. Oh, percent, that's easy. Percent's always over 100. What number is that? 50. So our percent is going to be 50%. All right, the next thing we have to do is our decimal. 50 hundredths, that was what we started with, so we could say 50 hundredths, which also equals the same as 5/10. All right, let's look. I want you to look at picture C. I want you to count all of these shaded spots, and I want to see if you can come up with what is going to be our fraction. You may begin. Crazy number I came up with, but I counted 48 of them were shaded out of 100. Now I could reduce that, right? I could cut it in half because they're even numbers. And if I cut it in half, that's going to be 24 out of 50, which I could cut in half again. And I have 12 over 25. All right, let's do our percent. Percent, oh, there it is right here. It's over 100. So my percent's going to be 48%. My decimal, we read this 48 hundredths. So I'm going to write 48 hundredths. This one I can't, there isn't a zero for me to drop, so I have to leave it as 48 hundredths. Great. All right, let's go ahead and move on. We're going to go ahead and actually flip over to the next chart. We have a nice big chart here, and we're going to see if we can kind of work on a few of this and start understanding a little bit of percent, decimal, and fraction. So we notice here we have a chart we're going to fill in, and we're not going to fill in the model for today, okay, because we're not going to draw those 100 boxes. But let's go ahead and look at 6%. 6%, we know percent goes over 100, so 6 goes over 100. Well, let's see. Percent goes over 100. Well, that's easy. So my fraction is 6 over 100. My decimal, well, let's read this. This says 6 hundredths. 6 hundredths. How do I write 6 hundredths? Well, hundredths would be tenths, hundredths. So I'd have to put the 6 here and add the 0 there. So this is how we write 6 hundredths. All right, let's go down to 60%. Oh, I want to do the fraction first because that one's easy. Percent always goes over 100, so I'm going to say here 60 over 100. Some of you actually know that we could actually reduce that, couldn't we? We could reduce that to 6 over 10 by canceling out our zeros, and some of you know we could even cut that in half again to 3/5. Look at all that. All right, so let's go back here. 60%. Let's look at it as a decimal. Oh, 60 hundredths. 60 hundredths would be written like this. 60 hundredths. Some of you know we could also make that. We could cross that 0 out and just put it as 6/10. It's the same thing. They're equivalent. What's my ratio going to be? What are the two numbers I'm going to look? Well, let's look here. Here's my two numbers. 60 to 100. If I wanted to reduce it, I sure could. I could cancel that and say, well, Mrs. Houck, 6 to 10 is the same ratio, and 3 to 5 are all equivalent. Look at this. My fractions and my ratios are the same. Oh, dear. Look at this. 600%. Let's do the fraction first. I know that percent always goes over 100. So this 600 is going to go over 100 like that. Boy, if I wanted to reduce that, boy, I could do a lot of reducing, couldn't I? I could do a lot of canceling out some zeros, which would actually give me 6 over 1. Interesting. All right, well, let's see. What's my decimal? My decimal, boy, this one's going to be hard. Well, this is 600 over 100. And 600 over 100 reduced to 6 over 1 And I know 6 over 1 actually is the same thing as the number 6. So my decimal is going to be a whole number 6. That's kind of a crazy one. All right, let's go over here and see. Well, my ratio is 600 to 100. 600 to 100. I could do a lot of canceling some zeros here if I wanted, and I could also say my ratio is 6 to 1. Wow, those bigger percents over 100 can be a little tricky. Oh, good. This one's a smaller one. Let's see if we can do 32%. 32%. Percent always, always, always goes over 100. So for my fraction, I'm going to do 32 over 100. Percent always goes over 100. My decimal. Well, let's read this. This says 32 hundredths. So that means I would write it like this. 32 hundredths. Let's do my ratio. What are the two numbers I see? The two numbers I see are 32 and 100. Now, some of you know your math facts, and some of you know you can actually reduce a lot of these. And if you wanted to reduce these, you sure could. You could cut them in half. If we cut this one in half, it looks like we would have 16 over 50, which means I could probably do the same thing over here. 16 over 50. Some of you notice you can actually cut it in half again. Boy, we can sure do a lot of reducing. This is an even number. I could cut 16 in half to 8 and 50 in half to 25. I can do that then here. All right, let's go ahead and turn over to the next page. All right, so I want you to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to see if you can fill in these boxes on your own. Remember, this one here is percent. I'm going to do a little practice here. This one here is your decimal. This one here is your fraction. And then the last one is our ratio, our two numbers. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video, see if you can fill in these boxes, and then when you're ready, turn the video on so you can check your work. Well, I guess I wasn't nice here because I noticed the last one didn't have anything but pictures. So let's go ahead and look and see how you did. So here I have 55 hundredths. That's how I read it. So I wrote 55 hundredths. I wrote it here as my ratio. Okay, percent always goes over 100. I didn't reduce these right now just because I wanted to make sure you figured out how to solve this. The second one I did, let's go and look at the next one. This one was kind of a challenging one. So I read this and I said it says 9/10. 9/10. Well, here's 9/10. 9/10. Here's 9/10. Well, I went ahead and I figured, you know, if I added a 0 here, whatever I do on the bottom, I do on the top, that would actually be the same as 90%. So I have here 90 hundredths, which is the same as 9/10. 90 to 100 could be my ratio, or 9/10. This last one was a trick one, and I should have noticed that before I gave it to you. If you notice, we had a picture here. Well, I looked at my picture and I noticed that there were 7 out of 10 boxes colored. 7 out of 10 would be written like this. And so then I went ahead and added my zeros, and I actually found out that that would be 70%. So here's my decimal, 70 hundredths, same as 7/10. And then there's my fraction. That one was a tricky one. All right, so go ahead and turn over to page S105, and this is going to be your homework. I'm so excited. You guys are going to be, a lot of you are going to be back here on school on Tuesday, so we'll get to look at your homework on Tuesday when you come into class. Those of you that aren't going to be with us on Tuesday, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and take a picture of your homework and send it to your teachers. So your homework is here on S105. You're going to do something very similar to what we did earlier with the apples on the very first page. It says, Marty owns a lawn mowing service. His company, which consists of 3 employees, has 100 lawns to mow this week. Use the 10 by 10 grid to model how the work could have been distributed between the 3 employees. Well, I've given you the 3 numbers that I want you to write, so I want you to fill these in your book. I want you to fill in the missing boxes, and then I want you to pick a color for each employee. So employee 1, pick a color, 2 and 3, and color in your grid to match with this information. So make sure you write this down. This is not the only homework problem you have. Turn over, you have one more. The last problem I want you to do is this one right here about Marissa. Marissa just bought 100 acres of land. She wants to grow apple, peach, and cherry trees on her land. Color the model to show how the acres could be distributed for each type of tree. Using your model, complete the table. So once again, you're going to copy these numbers down. You're going to fill in the missing boxes. Pick a color for apple, color it, peach, color, and cherry. And on Tuesday, when you guys are all back at school, we'll pull out our math books so we can grade our homework and see how you did. All right. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you guys all next week.